think is something you're really, really going to enjoy. If I may ask you just to make sure your cell phones are turned off after lunch, that would be great, not to interrupt the speakers and so on. My name is Hull Kenny, and I'm Vice President of Sales at the Employment Screening Services. We're a full-service background screening company, national and international. And what I'm going to ask the panel to do is just kind of run down the panel and give a little introduction of who they are, what they do, and so on, so you'll know who we're actually addressing. Elizabeth, will you start with us, please?
Sure. I'm Elizabeth Campbell. I'm a partner and the Chief Diversity Officer for the law firm Andrews Curran.
I'm Cynthia Rushing. I am in my reporting for Shell. I've been with Shell for over 18 years. Been in the oil and gas industry my entire career. I'm a native Estonian, and I am delighted to be here.
I'm Veronica Delgado. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources from Aquinas Management Services, also known as Lindbeck. I'm an officer of their company. I have been actually in that role for right at 2 years, and I am not from Houston. I'm from Louisiana.
I'm Jeff Chaponick. I am President and founder of MAC Executive Recruiters based out of Frisco, Texas, and the company has been in business for almost 20 years.
I'm Kathy Frazier, and I have the privilege of leading the HR function for Tenet Healthcare. Tenet's a very large employer. We're 110,000 employees, but more so. We actually serve about 4 million patients of all kinds of diversity and likes and minds of life, and therefore a lot of the stuff I look at from a diversity and inclusion perspective is how you serve the patient in the right way and in the right kind of employee base. So that's why I'm here and very interested in this conversation.
Great. Kathy, if it's okay, we're going to start with you.
Sure.
Can you be successful in the workplace without taking risks? And if so, could you give us a couple of examples?
So I love that question because I think if you asked many traditional healthcare people that work in the health area, they would say you should never take risks. You could potentially do harm to a patient. And I kind of look at this and say, it's an interesting thing, and I had this conversation with someone at lunch today, which was, you can be in an environment where safety and not taking risk is so important at one level in front of the patient when you're administering drugs or you're drawing blood or whatnot. You don't really want to take a lot of risks there, but that can easily permeate to a culture and create a culture where even someone in the business office or the corporate organization may say, I'm very risk averse, I can't do it. You cannot be successful if you don't take risks. You really have to. You have to know where it is to take risks in those areas and be really, really conscious of it, because culture sometimes will blanket over you and create a risk aversion and it's okay to just kind of go with the flow and not innovate. Over time, you will never succeed. You will never have the ideas that will lead to imagination, that will lead to innovation, unless you're willing to take some risks. It's just knowing where you do it, what you're hoping to find, and being really, really good with taking a risk and getting the stakeholders, the sponsors around you saying, hey, if you fail, it's okay, we understand what you're trying to do. And you cannot, there's cultures that provide that, and if you can kind of shape the microculture around an area that can be more innovative and risk-taking, that's great. I wouldn't be really risky if you were an accountant and doing SOX compliance work, but I would be really risky in kind of HR, where we're trying to figure out how to shift culture in a fundamentally different way. And that's where you have to kind of think where to turn it on and where to turn it off. That would be my perspective.
Excellent. Would anybody else on the panel like to have a comment on that question?
I think that, growing up, I saw my father working the same job for 30 years, doing the same thing day in and day out, and that the world has changed. In order to succeed and get ahead, you have to be willing to take the risks and step out of the comfort zone and look at opportunities. Sometimes that includes taking a step back in order to take a step forward, as long as the opportunity is there. And I think that a lot of people don't get that in today's world.
Anybody else?
I think that one of the things that because I also, as well as in human resources, is really to look at the population and the opportunities that exist in the companies that you might be working in. I know when I interviewed with Lindbeck, it was really interesting because I've always worked in large global companies, and so, but one of the things that intrigued me was the innovative factor, which is one of the things that you were alluding to. And innovation and entrepreneurship inside of a company, whether small or large, really makes a big difference in what the opportunities might be within those companies. some of the things that I did very young in my career, that my father owned a construction company, much like Lindbeck, was that they provided the opportunity to go out and see the world. We did projects that were internationally minded, and they saw diversity, and my father saw diversity, as does Lindbeck, as being diversity of thought as well. So it's not how a person looks or how a person comes across, it's also the diversity of thought. In my career, I actually was in France. I lived overseas for 3 years and led talent management function of a large French company, and I had not one American on my team, not one, and nobody spoke English. So I really got a full breadth of what it was to be a minority in a different country. And my experience that I had from that really applied back into the workforce. And so whenever I look and I interview and I meet people, no matter who they are, I look at, okay, what value, what is your strength as an individual? And then you try and take that and you calculate that into what that means to the company that you're working for. So that's kind of my feedback on taking risks.
Great. Go ahead.
The only thing I was going to say, I too have HR in my background, and I think it's HR that can actually move the needle forward. Often it is said, and this is a generalization, that men are hired based on potential, but women are hired or promoted based on actual performance. Like, what have they done? And if you don't have HR leaders who are willing to actually look at someone and make assessments about someone's potential, it may seem risky, but you know what you're doing. You know exactly the competencies to look for. If you could do X, then you could do Y, and make those leaps. So we really have a lot to thank for the leaders in our HR groups. I think that is an area where you can accomplish a lot by taking smart risks.
Great. Jeff, the next one is a real interesting one as well. Do you have any advice for millennials entering the workforce and how they should, if they should take a risk, or how they should take a risk?
Believe it or not, the first thing I would tell any millennial is to go onto YouTube and listen to Ashton Kutcher give his speech at the Kids' Choice Award a couple of years ago. It talked about moving up in career and never leaving one job for another, and the speech was just great, and I tell a lot of young people to watch it. As far as the taking of risks, what I think a lot of them suffer from, not all, but owning an executive recruiting company and talking to a lot of younger people, there are a few people that have invented an app that they've become very rich at, but for the most part, everybody has to go to work and earn a living. And no one should be afraid to get dirt underneath their fingernails in the beginning. No one should feel bad about paying their dues. They should not feel like mom and dad owe them the comforts that they live by working all their life. Please don't get me wrong, I don't think that millennials are lazy. I just think that they have a different view of the world today than from years ago. And once they understand that it takes hard work and effort, you get noticed when you work hard. There's nothing to be ashamed of by working hard and working your way up through an organization. And we spend a lot of time. In fact, my firm, we have an executive coach on staff full-time to work with all new employees that are being hired by our clients, that part of her job is working with these entry-level people, helping set expectations for them as their career grows. And so it's a competitive world out there, and so you have to, the people that rise to the top are the ones that work harder and give the extra mile. They don't look at their watch at 5 o'clock and go, I got to be out of here. There's a project that's due. It's important. I know it's important to my leader. Let me do this. You get noticed for things like that. Another issue or thing that I think is really important for people today is, and I experience it with my own children, believe me, there's nothing better than verbally communicating with someone. I know it's great to text, and my daughters, they can text, their thumbs move faster. You'd have to have a radar detector to see how fast their thumbs can move texting. But I will urge all of you to communicate verbally as much as you can with as many senior leaders as you can. There's a time and place for emails and texts, but not all the time. I hope that answers what you were looking for.
Absolutely, good. And would I like to add to that?
Yeah, I'd add something to this, because I think that I think there's two approaches. You can help millennials better fit within our world, what we define as our world, or at least in certain areas you can evolve your world to fit millennials' perspective. And at least in the world where I live, again in healthcare, where there's a shortage of healthcare workers, we are exploring the opportunity to kind of do more where employers are actually reaching into high schools, like our going K through 12, and figuring out how to both look for competencies, how to train for core skills and competencies of the future, and shifting, and this is the aspiration, not the reality today, but shifting our work patterns so that we're actually more accommodating, creating communities, creating career lattices for which people that come in can have that ADD on their career but do it all with the same employer and actually project it and expect it and embrace it. So, I think this is a convergence around getting them to fit within the world of which we've been successful, but at the same time creating the communities of which they will be, and starting very, very young. And I can't believe that I'm actually thinking K through 12. My daughter's 11 years old. If I had to think through doing this as a living, I would probably just kill myself right now. But I think that there is this deal about having to look there, and I think government right now and some of the regulations looking at that, what is that pivotal 8th grade where they're having to declare what they're interested in. 8th grade's a great place for employers to jump in and not necessarily agree that an 8th grader can make a choice about what they're going to do, but at least provide that element of choice, which today I feel this is separation. Employers just waiting for people to come out of college or high school, whereas I think the obligation is to go way deeper. That's a person perspective and something that tenants trying to exploring to do that.
I go back to my diversity of thought. I think you have to, that old Stephen Covey methodology is seek first to understand and to be understood. I seek to understand millennials. I know in our company that's one of the things that I've been working very heavily on, and I think that goes back to my career has mostly been in talent management. And I think that one of the main things that millennials can do is that they can go back and try and research their companies and really do calculated risks. So when you go and you look at a company, you say, what is the best fit for me with this company culture, right? You should not be making decisions about companies based upon you fitting into a mold. That is something, if that is your passion and that is your strength, then you need to find companies that fit that, no matter who you are and no matter where you are in your career, but more so for millennials than anything else. You know what you're good at, and that's going to show up whenever you perform. You're absolutely right. Whenever it comes back to performance, they're going to judge you based upon your performance. But if it's work-life balance you're seeking, if it's technology that you're seeking, you need to find companies that fit the model in which you work best in so that you can strive. As I say, harvesting talent. You want to be able to be in a place where you can be harvested and planted well so that you can stay 14 years or 15 years. And if that's not what you want, then that's okay. You need to find companies that fit the model that you're looking for.
So I would just add that it's important for you to just follow your passion. So when we talk about, 30 years ago, people were just working to retire. So they stayed with a company for 30 plus years through a pension. But for the millennium, I'm saying, follow your passion, do what you really enjoy doing, and take some risk in terms of, moving around. I think one of the things that we do is stay immobile, and I think that if you're mobile, there's a lot of opportunity for you. But again, if you just follow your passion, I think everything else will fall in place. What Veronica has mentioned about, knowing the culture of the company that you're working for, that's extremely important to make sure that, that's somewhere that you will thrive and that you will have the opportunity to grow and achieve the goals that you set for yourself. But be clear on what your passion is and what your goals are.
And just for me, and I'm sort of like Jeff, I've got children, and those of you who have children who are going through these phases, the way I love to say it is if you're a baby boomer, I mean, we're the ones who are raising these millennials. So this is not the blame game. These are my kids. You know, I'm the one who asked them how to spend my money. That's what they were taught. They were asked, what do you want for dinner? Where do you want to go on vacation? What movie? We ask them all these questions, and then we send them over down here to HR, and then they're like, shocked. Well, we groomed them. So when I try to just find that balance, I mean, without question, their view of the world is so different than a baby boomer's, and certainly a traditionalist, where working had its own satisfaction. For them, it does not. And so it's identifying those expectations and trying to adjust to them. But it's also taking leaders in organizations who are of the baby boomer generation, or maybe older Gen X's and traditionalists, and saying, we knew that you built this institution over 100 years ago, but times are changing, and everything cannot stay the way it used to, because you got to look at both ends. It can't be all about the millennials adjusting to us. Because it won't work. They'll go out and start their own company. They'll figure it out. And it will still be here with our baby boomers.
They'll be making apps.
That's right. That's it. And then we'll be looking for jobs with them. I mean, it's like, anyway, mutual adaptation. That was my mutual adaptation.
That's true. I have a millennial also. And one of the things that I've found with the millennials, with my son and his friends, that if they are understood, and they do want different things from the workforce and from whatever. But if in fact they find the right spot, they are absolutely the hardest working and the most loyal people in the world. I found that over and over in our company, and I found it, through, as I said, my son and his friends. Veronica, what risk have you seen employees take in the workplace that were unwise and invariably ended in big?
I think one of them that I've seen, yeah, and that's fine. I've managed some of those situations, and I think that a lot of times people think they know what they're good at, and they really aren't. Or they listen to someone say, "This is the career path you should go down," and it's not necessarily the right career path for them. I think, and I do apply this at Lindbeck as well, is not everybody's made for management. Okay? Sometimes people are excellent, technical, experts, and you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that for an individual. So what I've seen is that people have not listened to their gut. They don't necessarily know what they're really good at, and then they kind of follow the road of least resistance and just went in that path. And I think that that can be a career event that you can recover from. But I think that more than anything, you as an individual need to make sure that you make your decisions, going back to my previous comment, based upon yourself and your calculated risk that you make. One of the roles that I had that was a calculated risk outside of HR, because, by the way, HR people are not bad, so you need to challenge HR people too, by the way, is that I was over mergers and acquisitions for a very large acquisition that I did, totally outside of my comfort zone. Could have made a mistake if I would have not went that route, but was I okay with saying no? Sure. Did I think I could do it? Yes. So I knew I could do it, therefore I said, okay, I'll take that risk, and it was successful. But if I would have just kind of nodded my head and went down that path without making sure that I had all the competencies, like Kathy says, know your competencies, then I would have really been in a world of hurt with my career. So I think that my thing is to make sure that you know calculated risk and you know what you're good at.
Anybody else?
I think I learned something interesting. Our two daughters, my wife is in the audience, are both heading to college, going to be freshmen this year. And we went to one college meeting and they said, now parents, I want you to be aware that they're coming in as freshmen and they say they want to do this, but during the course of their 4 years here, the average is they change their mind 3.1 times on what they want to do. So be prepared for that. I think that can apply after you get out of school at the entry level of your career. I don't think you should be afraid to say, you know what, I thought I wanted to do this, but I'm going to change my mind and do that. I think at some point you have to find what you really enjoy and stick with it. but to change your mind on the front end and make a decision where it fits for you, that there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I've got two things I'd say about what I've seen, failure, individual failure.